Today we're looking at 5 motorcycles that had the right brand name, but everything else went wrong. These aren't rare garage builds or off-brand experiments. These are full-blown flops from the biggest names in the industry. Honda, Ducati, Harley-Davidson, Suzuki. Each one promised something bold, but ended up as a punchline. And the last one, it's a masterclass in how to make a motorcycle so forgettable. Even its own company pretended it never happened. The Suzuki RE5. Let's rewind to the 1970s, an era where motorcycle design was bursting at the seams with ambition. The Japanese Big Four were challenging European dominance. Racing tech was trickling into street bikes, and companies were throwing wild ideas at the wall to see what stuck. It was a time of 2-strokes, liquid cooling, disc brakes, and for Suzuki, something even more radical, the rotary engine. Enter the RE5, Suzuki's moonshot. Instead of pistons and cylinders moving up and down, the RE5's heart was a single rotor Wankel engine, a spinning triangle inside a chamber, promising smooth operation and fewer moving parts. On paper, it sounded like the future, sleek, simple, and capable of punching above its weight class. Suzuki spent nearly a decade and a serious chunk of its R&D budget bringing it to life. The result was a 497 cubic centimeter rotary engine producing 62 horsepower. That was respectable power for a mid-70s bike. The RE5 was meant to be a sporty tourer, a forward-thinking machine that would set Suzuki apart. They even hired legendary designer Giorgetto Giugiaro, yes, the guy who shaped the DeLorean and the Lotus Esprit, to design the bike's futuristic dash and bodywork. This wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a statement. But then reality hit. Riders, especially in the 70s, had a deep connection with their machines. They liked engines they could hear, feel, and fix in their garage. Rotary engines were mysterious. Mechanics didn't know how to service them. Parts were scarce. And unlike the engine's promises of lightweight performance, the RE5 needed an enormous radiator and cooling system just to keep it from overheating. That made it heavier than many of its air-cooled rivals. Worse, it had 2 built-in deal breakers for riders already concerned with rising gas prices. It drank fuel and burned oil by design. In the middle of a global oil crisis, that was a terrible look. The public wasn't ready for such a radical leap, and Suzuki wasn't ready for the backlash. Despite all their effort, the RE5 was a sales disaster. Suzuki quickly pulled the plug and shelved any future plans for rotary bikes. What was supposed to be the start of a new era quietly vanished, becoming an obscure collector's item and a lesson in why even the boldest innovation needs a bridge to the people it's made for. Today, the RE5 can be found in museum corners and niche enthusiast forums, not as the next big thing, but as a fascinating footnote in motorcycling history, a reminder that you can be ahead of your time and still fall flat. Suzuki swung for the future and missed, but where they failed by being too ahead of the curve, the next brand tripped over its own identity, trying to play both sides. The Harley-Davidson XR1200. Picture this. Harley-Davidson, a brand synonymous with chrome, cruisers, and open-road thunder, decides to break tradition. They roll out a bike with real racing DNA, sporty geometry, and a splash of Street Fighter flair. Sounds bold, sounds fresh, maybe even a little rebellious. That was the XR1200. Harley's answer to a question no one was really asking. Inspired by the legendary XR750 flat tracker, a bike that dominated dirt ovals and became a cultural icon, the XR1200 tried to channel that heritage into something street legal and performance oriented. On the spec sheet, it didn't look half bad. It boasted 90 horsepower, 73 foot-pounds of torque, upside-down forks, a beefed-up swing arm, Nissan brakes, and a sportier riding stance. For Harley, this was a performance leap. But while it looked great in press releases, the real world wasn't as kind. Traditional Harley riders, those loyal to laid-back cruisers and big touring bikes, weren't looking to carve corners or scrape knees. They wanted comfort, sound, and attitude, not agility. On the flip side, sport bike riders raised on flickable Yamahas and featherweight Ducatis looked at the XR1200's 580-pound curb weight and scoffed. For them, it was like strapping a gym bag to a barbell and calling it a super bike. So the XR1200 was caught in a no man's land, too heavy and underpowered for the sport crowd, too aggressive and unfamiliar for Harley's core audience. It didn't help that Harley's marketing was unclear. Was this a performance bike? A tribute machine? A niche collector's item? It never found its footing. In hindsight, there was real potential. The XR1200 handled surprisingly well for a Harley. It had solid brakes, responsive suspension, and a distinctive look. Enthusiasts today will call it a hidden gem or the one that got away. And they're not wrong, it's a cool machine, but at launch it sat unloved in showrooms, collecting dust while dealers pushed out more Softails and Sportsters. Ultimately, the XR1200 became a lesson in brand identity. No matter how solid the engineering or how noble the inspiration, a product still has to speak the language of its intended riders. And in this case, the XR1200 was talking to a crowd that never showed up. The Ducati Indiana. Say the name Ducati, and a very specific image fires in your brain. It's visceral, it's red, it's fast, screaming L-twin engines, dry clutches rattling like maracas, sleek trellis frames hugging tight corners on mountain passes. Ducati is passion on two wheels. Italian craftsmanship meeting race-bred performance, which makes the Ducati Indiana one of the most confusing, uncharacteristic motorcycles ever to wear the badge. It's so far removed from what Ducati stands for, it almost feels like a practical joke that accidentally made it into production. Born in the turbulent 1980s, the Indiana emerged during a chaotic chapter in Ducati's history. The company had just been acquired by Cagiva, a move driven by financial desperation more than vision. Cagiva wanted Ducati to expand beyond its niche sport bike image and take a bite out of the cruiser market, particularly in the US, where Harley-Davidson was king and Japanese cruisers were gaining steam. The result of that strategy was the Indiana, a motorcycle that tried to blend American cruiser aesthetics with Italian sport bike DNA. It had a teardrop gas tank and laid-back bars, but also Ducati's unmistakable trellis frame and a riding stance that never fully committed to comfort or control. The styling felt like it was stuck between Rome and Route 66, and not in a good way. It was neither elegant nor tough, just awkward. Powering the Indiana was a 649 cubic centimeter air-cooled L-twin engine producing 43 horsepower. Now, that's a respectable number for a mid-range commuter. But for a cruiser, that's anemic. Cruiser riders crave torque, low-end grunt that pulls you along without effort. The Indiana's engine wanted to rev high like a sport bike, making it a poor fit for relaxed cruising. The throttle response felt strained. The ergonomics weren't particularly comfortable. It lacked presence, performance, and personality, three things Ducati usually delivers in spades. And the market noticed. European riders, who loved Ducati for its sporty edge, wanted nothing to do with this cruiser pretender. And American cruiser fans were confused by its identity. It didn't rumble like a Harley, it didn't look like a Japanese cruiser, and it didn't handle like a Ducati. It was a bike without a tribe. Sales were abysmal, reviews were lukewarm at best, and Ducati quietly backed away from the project, never really acknowledging it again. The Indiana wasn't just a failure, it was a rare moment where Ducati lost sight of what made its brand special. Today, the Indiana is largely forgotten, except by hardcore collectors and YouTubers looking for content. It's a footnote, a cautionary tale about trying to chase trends without honoring your roots. If Ducati had a delete from memory button, you can bet the Indiana would be at the top of the list. If the Ducati Indiana was a brand forgetting who it was, the next bike is the opposite. A brand indulging exactly who they are, to an absurd degree. Part motorcycle, part sci-fi art project, and all kinds of excessives. The Honda Rune. Most motorcycles are engineered with a clear purpose: commuting, touring, racing, or off-road domination, but not the Honda Rune. This wasn't a response to rider demand, market gaps, or sales targets. It was a flex, a mechanical sculpture on two wheels built to provoke reactions, not solve problems. If most bikes are tools, the Rune was a statement piece. Honda's way of saying, look at what we're capable of, with zero regard for whether anyone was actually asking. Released in 2004, the Rune shared its heart with the mighty Honda Gold Wing, an 1832 cubic centimeter flat-six engine known for its buttery smooth power delivery. But from there, the similarities ended. The rest of the bike was an exercise in pure excess. Its front suspension used an exotic trailing link setup more at home on concept sketches than production bikes. The bodywork was sculpted and sweeping, drenched in chrome, and so aggressive in form it made the notoriously bold Hayabusa look almost tame by comparison. And then there was the price tag, $27,000. But here's the twist. Honda reportedly spent more than $100,000 building each unit, willingly taking a loss of around $75,000 per bike. Why? Because the Rune wasn't about margins. It was about image, legacy, and the thrill of creating something that looked like it had rolled out of a sci-fi movie and into the real world. But here's the thing, just because something turns heads doesn't mean it moves off showroom floors. The Rune was too wild for most riders, too expensive for cruiser buyers, and too impractical for everyday use. It didn't have luggage options, wind protection, or much comfort. It was heavy, overly complex, and borderline unapproachable. Today, the Honda Rune is remembered not as a bestseller or an engineering breakthrough, but as a glorious, chrome-drenched misstep, a reminder that even the most disciplined, forward-thinking company in motorcycling can sometimes throw logic out the window and build a rolling art project, just because they can. The Honda CB500T. In the 1970s, Honda was absolutely crushing it. They were the rising star of the motorcycle world, consistently delivering bikes that were not only reliable but technologically ahead of their time. The CB750 had just kicked the door down on what a superbike could be, and their smaller models like the CB350 and CB450 were racking up loyal fans. Honda was rewriting the rules of motorcycling, and then there was the CB500T. While other Hondas were pushing boundaries, the CB500T felt like a step backward, or worse, a desperate attempt to squeeze a few more bucks out of an aging design. It was basically a warmed over CB450 with a modest increase in displacement, but no meaningful innovation. Honda gave it a T for touring, but in practice, it had all the refinement of a paint mixer at full throttle. At cruising speeds around 70 miles per hour, the vibration was so intense it felt like the bike was trying to shake you off. Reviewers at the time even complimented the seat, not for its comfort, but for dulling the relentless buzz just enough to stop your spine from fusing. If you dared to push it faster, the engine didn't just protest, it screamed. Numb hands, blurred mirrors, and rattled fillings came standard. The transmission didn't help matters. It was rough, clunky, and prone to slipping into false neutrals, especially when you were trying to ride aggressively. Shifting felt like guesswork, and sometimes you'd hear unsettling mechanical clunks that didn't exactly inspire confidence. For a company known for buttery smooth gearboxes, this one felt like it missed quality control entirely. To make things worse, Honda released the CB550 around the same time, a four-cylinder that was smoother, more powerful, and far more refined. In every conceivable way, it made the CB500T look like a relic. Why would anyone choose the underperforming twin when a modern, better engineered alternative was sitting right next to it in the showroom? The CB500T was discontinued after just 2 years, quietly swept under the rug. It didn't destroy Honda's reputation, but it did put a small scratch on their otherwise polished image. Today, it's a curious oddity, barely remembered, rarely praised, and occasionally dragged out as an example of how even Honda can swing and miss. So there you have it, 5 bikes that prove even the best in the business can miss the mark. Whether it was chasing trends, pushing boundaries, or just plain overthinking it, these machines left behind more confusion than legacy. But now, I want to hear from you. What's your pick for the biggest motorcycle flop of all time? Or maybe there's a misunderstood bike you think deserves redemption. Drop it in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown of beautifully bad decisions on 2 wheels, hit that like button. It helps more than you think. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. We've got plenty more machines to roast, or maybe even redeem. Thanks for watching, and ride safe.